So, it's been a while. It has been a long time since I have recorded and posted a video. Yeah, there's been like 3 Jurassic World Alive updates since I last made a video, and I've just been forgetting to make tier list videos or ranking videos and whatnot. Maybe I'm lazy, I don't know what got into me. But, we're doing a 2.7 tier list video. Well, we're making a series of 2.7 tier list videos. I did a poll on the Discord about if we should start from the top and go down, or start from the bottom and go up. And it was a near unanimous decision for starting at the bottom and going up. So, today, this first video will be Carcass, Hatchling, and Scavenger. And in our second video will be Survivor and Beta. And then our next one will be Low, Mid, and High Alpha. And then Low, Mid, and High Elite. And then Low, Mid, and High Tyrant and Overlord. So that would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 videos in this series. Alright, let's begin. We'll start with Carcass. So yeah, Carcass is just the worst dinosaurs in the game. Yeah. Very trash and should never be used under any circumstances. They have barely any good matchups. They just don't have use. Our first one is Archaeotherium. Yeah, just looking at this, you can already tell it is awful. Literally just bad survivability, bad damage output, literally 1 resistance, an awful moveset, and yeah, it is terrible. Our next one is Dimorphodon, which is, it's got the least damage by an absolute country mile. 500 is just awful. I don't know why Ludia gave this thing such low damage, but it makes this thing terrible. And while it's got a good amount of bleed damage, it's not going to work that well because its health is non-existent and it's going to get one-shot regularly. This thing is terrible. It should not be used at all, and it's honestly always been bad, but it's particularly trash right now. And our last one in Carcass is Iguanodon. It's a non-hybrid hadrosaur, so you could probably expect it to be bad. It's a raid healer, but you don't use this in any raids either. By the way, this tier list is completely unboosted, level 26, so like a skill tournament, but everything is included, of course. And raid viability is not included. Strictly PvP. So, Iguanodon is also awful. It literally just has a strike and then a 1.5 times heal with 1000 damage. And it's slow and its health isn't really that great. And that's Iguanodon. Okay, we're going to go into Hatchling next, and we're going to go by rarity, so we're going to go for the commons first. The first common is Apatosaurus. Apato is terrible. It may have one of the highest health values in the game, 6,000, but it can only do 1,800 in 2 turns, which is awful. 900 base damage of 2 strikes, really, and it's also the slowest creature in the game, but I don't really think that hurts it too much. It's just the fact that it has no multipliers with awful base damage. It has very few good matchups. Apato is trash. Majungasaurus is next. Majungasaurus is probably the best dino in Hatchling tier, but once again, it is still terrible. Its health is bad, its damage is bad, and its speed is bad. Although the damage is kind of helped by it having a counterattack. So that can be 4,000 in 2 turns, although you'll get 2-shot by most viable creatures. The moveset isn't awful, it's just the stats are terrible. If it had more health, if it had like 4,200 health, then this would undoubtedly be better than Lithonax. But it's not. So, yeah. Swapping Frosty doesn't really help either, again, because of the minuscule health. Next is Parasaurolophus, which is it's on the very weaker end. Very weaker end. I cannot talk today. It's on the weaker end of hatchling. It's basically just an upgraded Iguanodon. Less speed, and it doesn't heal as much, but you don't use the heal on these things anyways. But it just has more damage output and more health. Again, you're not going to be using these anyway, so it's pointless to even talk about them. Our last common in hatchling is Stegosaurus, which is basically like a Apatosaurus, except a couple of the base stats are switched around. Where is it? There it is. So it's got a bit less survivability with a lot less health but some armor to make up for that. It's faster, it's got more base damage, and its moveset is literally the exact same. I would say this is just ever so slightly better than Apato, but again, it's still trash. Yeah, you wouldn't be using this. Okay, now for the rares. There are 4 rares in here. The first one is Irritator. Irritator is really bad. It may be one of the best creatures in the game for raids, but in PvP, it is absolutely useless. It's looking at its base stats and its resistances, it may not seem that bad. Sure, the damage is a bit low, but it's got good health and good speed, and it can't be slowed down, and a high crit chance. Until you notice that the only damaging option this thing has is literally just Defense Shattering Strike, and then some attack buffing moves. This thing has really bad matchups, and if raids were included, this would be a lot higher, but raids are not included, so Irritator fits comfortably in hatchling. Next is Capro. Capro is, in my opinion, either the first, or it's either the worst rare in the game or the second worst rare in the game. It is worse than Irritator, though. It's got the same damage as Irritator, but less health and less speed and less crit chance, and it's basically got the same resistances. 50% vulnerability resistance, is nothing really. It's not useful at all. But you could arguably say that vulnerability, which is what Irritator has, isn't any better. Still has a Defense Shattering basic move, Group Frosty Strike, and Group Cleansing Strike, so it's got a bit more damage output, but it's not tanky like Irritator. And plus Group Frosty Strike is still terrible. It's 3,000 in 2 turns, it's not good. Capro is trash, and enough said. Tenontosaurus. This is tied for Capro for being the worst rare in the game. Where's Tenonto? There it is. This is basically Iguanodon, but slightly better. It's got a bit more health and a little bit more speed, and then more healing options. But you're still not going to be using this. It is still terrible. I would say this is actually worse than Parasaurolophus, just because it has less damage. Yeah. And then the last rare is Tubandactylus, which I would say this is probably tied with Majungasaurus for being the best in hatchling. It's a fast counterattacker, but it has no health. 3,000 is really bad. But it's fast. It's only got 950 damage, but it has a counterattack. It does have one notable matchup, and that is Ankylosaurus, which means this thing can be used in rare tournaments. But outside of rare tournaments, you're not going to be using this at all. And really, in rare tournaments, why would you use this anyway? You have way better options that kill Ankylosaurus. It's got a shield, which doesn't help. Impact to Run does do a bit of damage, but it's not really going to survive to it that often. Swap and Frozy is useless because it has no health. And yeah. Alright, now one epic in here. That is Oranosaurus, which is by a mile the worst epic in the game. I would say that this is also worse than Parasaurolophus, so that means there's only 3 commons that are worse than this. It is another Hadrosaur, surprise, surprise. So it's got really low health, really awful speed, and sure, its damage is good, but it's going to get 3-shot basically every time by anything that's good. And it's just terrible. it's only going to get 3,000 out in 2 turns. Sure, it can heal almost all of its health, but it's still terrible, and it wins very few matchups. Anyways, moving on to the Scavenger tier. These aren't as bad as Hatchling, but again, you're not going to be using these. Like, the commons in here are still weak commons. The rares in here are terrible. The epics in here are even worse for their rarity. Yeah, starting with the commons, Anky Gen 2. Anky Gen 2 is probably the weakest creature in Scavenger. It's got decent survivability with the shield and then having okay health and armor. Its output is only 2,500 in 2 turns, which isn't good. But Spirit Vulnerability is a good move. And lastly, it's pretty slow. There's really not much to talk about with this dino, so yeah, moving on. Next common is Deinonychus, also one of the weakest creatures in Scavenger. It's a raptor. This is actually the first cunning creature to be in this tier list. There are a few more cunning creatures in this tier, though. Yeah, absolutely tiny health pool, with really not good damage either. It is one of the fastest creatures in the game, but this thing is just a worse Velociraptor. Everything this thing does, Velociraptor does better. If this thing had like 1,400 to 1,500 damage, this might be better than Velo, but it doesn't. Actually, no, this probably wouldn't be better than Velo. Give it same damage as Velo, and it'd definitely be better. Just really bad. Don't use it. Our next common's Galley. Gallimimus is, I would say it's kind of in the middle of this tier. It's another cunning creature. So it's got more, except for speed, it has better stats across the board than Deinonychus. Although it does have a little bit less 2-turn damage output due to it not having a rampage. But it does have swap synergy, and it has good resistances too. Again, it's still terrible, and don't use it. Haast, another one that I would put near the bottom of this tier. Hats just isn't good. Like, on paper, it looks like it'd be pretty strong, but in practice, it sucks. Like, sure, the damage isn't the worst for what it is, and the speed isn't the worst either, and it's got good health. And then Resilient Strike and Impacted Run is an okay moveset, and swap and defense is admittedly not very good. But it just does not work when it's used in a practical sense. It isn't good. Next is Lithonex. Lithonex is, I would say it's probably the second best in the tier. Lithonex is still terrible, obviously, but it's not like awful. It's got the same stats as Majungasaurus, except for 1 less speed and then a bunch more health. And all of its moves are shield, which lets it survive and get off more counters. Again, it's still bad, but it's not as bad as Majungasaurus. Miragaia is the best common, or the best creature in this tier, or maybe tied with Lithonex. So Miragaia, it's got more speed and a lot less health than Lithonex, but it's got, I would say, a better moveset. Shielded Accelerating Strike is great. One of the best basic moves in the game. And then Emergency Heal, I guess it lets it heal half its health, get off another counter, and then Accelerating Counter. This thing used to be absolutely busted when it had 1350 base damage with still having that full counter. That was absolutely broken. But it has seen a fall from grace. Next is Monolophosaurus Gen 2. Mono Gen 2 is also near the middle of this tier. It's the same health as Galley, with a little bit more damage and a little bit less speed. Cunning Strike and Distracting Impact. Very bread and butter cunning moveset. Yeah, this thing is... It does have a decent matchup against one of the top commons, Allosaurus, and it beats some epics, I think it beats Rex. And it definitely beats Rex Gen 2 and Gorgosaurus. It's still really bad. It's gonna get murdered by any resilient. It's gonna get murdered by anything that's faster. It is trash. Our last common is Stygimoloch Gen 2. Another common that is just an impact and run thing. It's got less speed and more health than Galley with the same damage. It's basically just resilient Gallimimus. The only difference in moveset is it has Shielding Strike instead of Evasive Strike. I don't know whether to say that's a bit better, but this thing doesn't have the resistances, which is why I put this maybe a little bit below Galley. But of course, both of them are still terrible, and you wouldn't really use these at all. Alright, time for the rares. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rares in this tier. First one's Apatosaurus. Another creature that's seen a fall from grace since the glory days of before 2.0. This thing just has awful base stats. The health may not seem terrible, but for what this thing is, for a dino with devastation, this thing has no survivability. And then the base damage is bad, and the speed is bad. It does have okay resistances, but I don't think that helps Bahada at all. Its moveset's fine. Swap and Heal sucks, but Spear of Vulnerability and Devastation are good. Taunting Bellow's not terrible. It's just those stats let it down so much, and that's what makes this thing bad. It is almost always going to die before it gets that devastation off. Next is Edmontosaurus, which is another Hadrosaur. Although this is better than, of course, this is quite a bit better than the previous Hadrosaurs. It has a lot of health, and of course it still has the lowish speed and the 1000 damage that's usual with Hadrosaurs. Unlike the previous Hadrosaurs, this one actually has a multiplier. It's got Resilient Impact, which helps it kill some cunning creatures. Some admittedly kind of bad cunning creatures, but it still beats some of the cunnings, which can be good. It beats Velo, which is good. I guess that's good. The last Hadrosaurus didn't beat Velo. It's still terrible, though. It is among the worst creatures of Scavenger. Definitely the worst rare in Scavenger. But it's, of course, better than the hatchling things. Next is Haast Gen 2. When you can only do... When it takes 3 turns to deal 3,000 damage... When it takes 3 turns to kill something with 3,000 health, then you know you're bad. 1,000... This thing just doesn't have good base stats. Its health is bad, its damage is bad. The speed's good, but that doesn't help it. And its moveset is... Fearless Flap is good, but the rest of it is terrible. This thing is really good against fierce creatures. Like, I think it beats... Okay, I don't think it beats Thor, but it does stall Thor forever. And that's a high elite dino. But I don't really think that gives this thing any points. It's just not good. It's one of the better rares of this tier, but again, it's still not good. Next is Megalosaurus, which is a creature that has experienced the fall of grace unlike any other. Well, any other non-hybrid, I should say. Actually, there is Orano, but still. Megalosaurus is terrible. It can only do 2,500 in 2 turns. Its health is bad. Damage is bad. The resistances are pretty good with good speed. Like, it can't be slowed at 127. That's good speed, but... The moveset doesn't seem that bad either. It's just the damage and the health bring this thing down so far. This thing has kind of plays a little bit like Bahada, in that you just spam your basic move and do your big move whenever you can. Although, and then it also has a bit of a stalling move. Although this thing isn't as damage focused, it's more speed focused, and it has a lot of slowing moves. But yeah, still terrible. Our last rare is Postosuchus, which is also one of the I would tie this with Miragai and Lithonax for being the strongest in this tier. Postosuchus is also another rare that used to be awesome and is now terrible. Like, this thing used to have more health, it used to have a lot of damage, it had ferocious impact. This thing used to have the highest turn 1 in the game, which was impressive. Now it sucks. Its one good thing is that it's 126 and can't be slowed down, and it also has 3,602 turns, which is alright. But it's, of course, still bad. As Right on the Pulse is one of the worst moves in the game. Group Procy Strike sucks. Fierce Strike is the resistances, I guess, are fine. It's just got low health, low base mediocre base damage. Posto doesn't really win very many good matchups. It does also beat Andrewsarchus, and then it can do some stuff against tanks. So it does generally have better matchups than Tupidactylus, as far as I know. Alright, now for the epics. There are 3 epics in this tier. The first one is Darwinopterus. Darwin is like Dimorphodon, but better. It's got double the base damage and 1 speed faster. Otherwise, the stats are the same. And then Swap and Wound, of course. Minor Swoop is really bad on this thing because it has 0 health and this thing has delay. So if it was Cleansing Swoop, maybe it'd be better, but it's Minor Swoop. This is, I think this is one of 2 creatures in this game that has Pinning Strike. And then Fierce Impact is the Fierce Impact. Yeah, really bad. Our next one's Euclatosaurus, which is literally just a weaker version of the Megalosaurus, even though it's a higher rarity. So it's same health, same damage, 1 more speed, except this thing can be slowed down. It can be slowed down. The moveset is debatably better. Superiority Impact could be, you could say that's better than Decelerating Impact, but this thing can be slowed down, which automatically makes it worse than Megalosaurus, which is the same thing, except Megalosaurus can't be slowed down. And of course, it's a non-hybrid deer. It's automatically terrible, anyways. And the last creature for this video is Colosuchus. This thing used to be just mediocre, and then now it's awful. The health is completely meh. The damage is bad. The speed's good, but only 1 resistance isn't that great. And then Cunning Strike, Distracting Impact. These 2 moves are okay. This move is not. Group Distraction sucks. It's just awful. Give it, like, Distracting Rampage or Cunning Rampage, and that would make this thing actually pretty okay. It would bring it up to at least Survivor and maybe Beta tier if you gave this thing a Rampage instead of Group Distraction. But no, it's stuck with this trashy move, and it will be stuck in Scavenger until it gets buffed. Or in the event it gets nerfed, it's going to go to Hatchling. Which is something that I feel like Ludia might do. So that is all for this first video. Hope you enjoyed. I hope you enjoy. What was I gonna say? Oh yeah. I hope you don't think this video is trash like I think it is, because I haven't made a video in months, so I might be terrible at it. Let me know what you think in the comments, and if you're in it, then in the Discord. Subscribe if you want to, and have fun playing JWA. Yeah. Okay, bye.